Bueno, yo me llamo Jorge.
Hey man, so tell me about
Ese es
it.
mi amigo.
Tell me about it.
He come all the way from Missouri.
Just come and speak to my friend here, Jorge. It
We-
took a long ways to get here.
Yeah.
I'm here in Fresno.
He
Same
come
guy.
clear across the world to come here and say hi to me. Say hi to me perritos and come to my rancho. And mi burritos.
Alright, I think we did it long enough to where we knocked off the losers who were trying to just watch a fun video or something like.
Okay. All right. Let me pretend I speak English.
Okay.
My real language is Spanish.
Okay. Do you believe in God? First question.
Wait. Who am I, man?
Oh yeah, that's right. How did we meet?
Oh, my name is George, and I had this crazy notion of going back to the South to. Do we need to take that again? I cleared my voice.
You're fine.
My
I'll,
throat.
I'll
Okay.
edit that out.
All right, good. Wow.
I'm keeping that one in.
Okay. I'm locking the gate, locking us out.
All right.
We're entering in no man's zone here.
Hello, and welcome to my testimony, where I ask friends about their life. I really hope I leave that in. I am going to leave that in. Uncut, unedited, my testimony. And we have George here today. Shutting his gate. Drove here from Missouri to California for the sole purpose to talk to and to hang out with and to hear and to just kick it with George. I've been just talking to the camera, getting comfortable.
Okay.
I didn't say anything of how we met.
Well, that's all right. Then we can say that part. Or we can just pass that part. Okay. This is. Well, we met when I had this crazy notion of going to Texas. I had an experience when I was a child. I was 10 years old. A hurricane came through our town in Corpus Christi, Texas, and blew the house away and almost us inside of it. We managed to stay alive the time that the hurricane was blowing 200-mile-an-hour winds. When it hit the land, it was still up there about 150-mile-an-hour winds, enough to take our house away while we were in it. And so we almost died, but we survived, and that always stuck with me. I'm 57 years old at that time. And here recently, before the storm happened in 2016, what was the name of that storm?
Hurricane Harvey.
I was going to say Harvey.
I didn't even know that you were in a hurricane.
Yeah, no?
I didn't even know you lived in Corpus Christi until
Yes.
your wife said something.
I was born there. And so anyway, hurricane came through, blew our house away. My mother said, that's it. We're getting out of Texas. We're going to California. And so for a year and a half or so, we planned to come to California. And as we were coming to California, I remember telling her, Mom, there's earthquakes in California. She said, shut up, I don't care. I'd rather live in an earthquake than go through another one of these hurricanes and almost die. So we came to California and did experience a lot of earthquakes. But she was right, we didn't die. But that's how I met Sam. It came back to me. I started dreaming about that time, and then Harvey was coming with packing 200-mile-an-hour winds or something like that, you know. And I said, this storm's going to hit, and I need to go over there and relate to the people. I didn't just live through that storm for nothing, so I just decided to pack up and go. But I thought I would go to Tampa, Florida, where supposedly all the news was about Tampa, Florida, and Florida. Yeah. Well, that it was going to hit there and what have you. So went over there. No, this was Harvey. We didn't have any news about Rockport.
Yeah.
But I went all the way to Tampa, didn't find anything. FEMA had already been there and didn't need our help. So I left 4,000 pounds of food that Gleanings for the Hungry kindly gave me. They gave me about 8,000 pounds of food, and but I left it to some homeless, a homeless shelter there, and they were able to use it. So then I left there and went to. I figured I would just follow the trees that were falling and where the storm may have came in. I wasn't convinced that there wasn't a more of a dramatic thing, and so I just kind of followed the land and the way things looked, and it led me all the way to Rockport, Texas, where it was devastated. It looked like a nuclear bomb had hit it. Yeah, trees were all knocked down. I mean, it was a horrendous sight. It reminded me of the time when I was a kid. And Sam was working at a church that I went to hang out with, and he was there helping, filming and helping in anything they needed. So we kind of ran into each other that way. He was reading his Bible, and I saw him in the midst of all of these senior people.
On my phone reading the Bible.
Was it your phone?
Yeah, it was my phone.
Yeah. And
you seemed to know. You just knew that I was reading. So instead of asking, hey, what are you Instagramming, or hey, what are you Facebooking, you go, hey, what are you reading?
What chapter are you reading?
Yeah, what chapter are you reading?
I'm taking this call. Yes. Here we go. Hello. Buenas tardes, don Juan. ¿Cómo está? Sí, ahí voy de camino ahorita. Llegará ya 30 minutos. ¿Y Rafa? Perfecto. Ahí voy, don Juan. Sí. Gracias. Ahí voy. No tardo más de 20 minutos, yo creo. Ok. Gracias, bye. So my renter is telling me the checks are ready, so we can go into town and pick them up. Positive.
Perfect timing.
Yes. So where were we, Sam?
Were you asking me what chapter you're reading?
Oh yeah, I asked him, what are you reading? What chapter are you reading? And he said, the book of James. And I thought, wow, that is really unusual. Here's this young kid, good-looking kid, red-headed kid, sitting there, minding his own business, just reading his Bible, and there's all these seniors around, sitting around. Yeah, they weren't reading their Bible, they were just having conversation, what have you. But this kid impressed me, so he stuck out like a sore thumb.
The average age there was like 70.
Yes, the average age was 70.
The only reason it's not 75 is because I was there.
Yes, and I was the second youngest at 57. No, 56. 55, I'm sorry.
Yep.
55. And so that's how we hit it off. We hit it off pretty good. I had a different thing to do. I was driving forklift and met some great people. Cindy, for one, Bill and Janice, and for some reason I can't remember the rest, but they were fantastic people that God had sent there and in my life, and helping these people with endless energy, especially Cindy. I can't say enough about that lady. I think it was an angel. I don't think couldn't have been a woman. She was pretty, she was nice, and she was very pleasant to talk to, and I couldn't believe how she would maintain her sanity after somebody would be upset at her for something and this and that they didn't get this or they didn't get that, and she just kept a very level head. You could tell it was the Holy Spirit on her. So, and then Sam was, he was a yes man, yes ma'am, and he did everything that she said, which was, again, all this is very unusual for someone of Sam's age, because the majority of them were either working or they're just into themselves. This kid, for some reason, was helping everybody, and just thought, wow, I got to know this kid. So that's how we met.
That's how we met. How'd you meet Jesus?
Hey.
Hey.
Jesus. Oh, man, that's an embarrassing story.
Yeah?
That's an embarrassing story.
Well, it's a story that I'm sure hundreds and thousands of viewers
Hundreds of thousands. Oh man, this is going to be even more embarrassing.
No.
Well, my wife was dying. She had an aneurysm that almost took her life, and we were living in a one-bedroom apartment, and she was pregnant with our first son, George Jr. She was like 3 months pregnant, and because of the extra volume of blood that the baby needed, well, it blew a vein, a tiny malformation of veins in her head that she had been harboring for all of her life, and it was until this pregnancy that it divulged itself. I don't know, it's a big word for me, and she had these convulsions and what have you, and so I freaked out. We were young. I was in my very early beginning 20s, and I think she was 19, and I didn't know what was going on, and I stuck a spoon in her mouth thinking that that would help because she looked like she was swallowing her tongue, but I ended up cutting all the roof from her mouth. But anyway, how did I meet Jesus? Well, we were broke, and but God, I can't say enough about him. He kept this lumberyard called Builder's Emporium going until my wife had her aneurysm, and she almost died because she was going through these continual convulsions. I got bad breaks. So that's why
We're trying to fix the mic. If you're curious, what the heck?
No, I know.
No, not you. The people who are watching, they're like, "What is this guy doing?" He's like, not even listening, which I am.
Well, he's got this funny-looking thing looking at me.
You don't worry about it. I'll take care of this. I'm going to maneuver this to where it's going to stay somewhere. You have any duct tape in here?
You can edit all this other stuff out, right?
Yeah, of
Okay,
course.
cool.
No,
Driving through the country here.
Trying to mount a microphone.
You would think we're out in the middle of nowhere. There's nothing but hills and mountains and cattle, and we're heading towards the orange groves and things like that. But
Well, that's why I got the camera set up this way too, so they can.
You do? Oh.
Basically, they're going to be witness
That guy,
driving.
this kid, he's just got too much talent. All these people are my friends, live on these hills, and I work on their cars and what have you, and some very remote places here. But anyway, I met Jesus in the desert. I had to drive that day a truckload of doors and door jams to Lancaster, California, and I was living in Orange County, and so that was about 70, 80 miles away. And I couldn't leave when my wife had this convulsion, she was going in and out of these convulsions every 5 minutes, and she wasn't really coherent. But when the paramedics came and got her, they took her to the emergency room, and she basically stayed in intensive care the whole time because they couldn't figure out why she was having these convulsions. And when I was a kid, my mother was a nurse, and she worked for a doctor who was a neurologist, and she interpreted for him so that he could understand Hispanic people. And one day some guy came in on his hands and knees crawling, and I'm going somewhere with this. I didn't just change gears on you, but I still going to tell you how I met Jesus, but I need to set the foundation. But anyway, he interviewed this man who came in on his hands and knees, and my mother interpreted for him what was going on, why he couldn't stand up and keep his balance. He had a terrible case of vertigo. And after a series of questions, the doctor determined that he had something going on in the back of his head. One of the main questions he asked him was, do you like tacos? And he said, looked up, from his position, of course I do. Doesn't anybody? And he says, okay, where do you eat your tacos? He says, well, I like the ones from Mexico. I go across the border and stop at my favorite taco store and buy a bunch of tacos and eat them and come back. And he says, okay, what kind of tacos? He says, mainly pork. Okay. And And after that, he says, well, I think what you have is a severe case of tricholosis. I think that's the right term. And the next day they operated on him, and in the back of the head they took out all these worms, my mother said. That, yeah, from the pork, and it was so bad that, you know, they were microscopic, and a lot of them ended up in his ear too, and that it threw his balance off, his equilibrium. So that's why he couldn't stand. So a couple of days later, he was standing, walking normal, back to normal again, but had to take all this medication to kill those worms. And if they don't come out there, they come out of your skin, and it's a bad case. So make sure you cook your tacos, your pork anyway. But anyway, that story I tell you because these doctors couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And I remembered a story that my mother had told my stepdad about. So, you know, it was a brain thing, and, you know, they said it was a brain thing, and I didn't know a difference between a neurologist or orthodontist or whatever. But I just remember she worked for a brain doctor, thank you. So I called her up. I'm living here in California now. We moved when we just got married, my wife and I, in '83. And in '86, it's when we were trying to have our first kid. And my mom answers the phone anyway, and I explain to her what's going on with Dora in the hospital with convulsions. And we don't know about aneurysms yet, you know, so that doesn't come up yet in this conversation until the doctor examines her and determines that she has a malformation of arteries after a series of CAT scans he ran. But how we got to this doctor is the key thing, because when I called my mom, I said, hey Mom, do you remember the name of that doctor that you used to work for, and he would do these incredible things with people's brains, like you know, a bunch of worms in her brains. And she goes, oh yes, I remember that was Dr. Jen Ho Kin. And she goes, I don't know how you remember that because you weren't anywhere around when I was talking to your stepdad about it. I said, well, I was eavesdropping, and I heard you I overheard you talking to him about that. So she goes, yes. I said, is he still practicing? She says, yes, and she gave me the phone number. And so she said, well, I hope Dora gets better, and all too, I'll be praying for her. So then I immediately called the doctor, and he said, he talked to me, and he says, yes, I remember your mom. And he said, well, I can look at her, providing your HMO, your insurance will allow it, and the doctors, they have exhausted their resources with what they can do, and then they can invite me in to come and help them. And so I set all that up. He comes in, he examines my wife, Dora, and runs a series of CAT scans and finds a malformation of arteries that were interrupting because of the blood pressure. And so I couldn't stay for the surgery that he said she had to have the next day, and it would take about 10 hours to do the surgery, maybe more. And the chances of her survival were really slim and none. I mean, percentages were very high for not surviving. And that didn't go down very well with me, and they wanted me to make a choice about the baby, because the baby was in her womb, and unless you know, the medication they were going to put her under, the anesthesia and things like that, could have an effect on the baby, and so they wanted to know if it was okay to abort the baby, and I said no. My wife wouldn't let me do that. You know, I don't have that choice to make. And, you know, no. And so they went with it. It took another series of doctors to be in the room there along with her, because there was anesthesiologists for her and anesthesiologists for the baby and a baby doctor, like 10 doctors in this room, you know, monitoring baby and my wife,
George,
the mom, yeah, George Jr. And so, well, I couldn't be there to wait for the surgery because I had to pay the rent, so I had to get in the truck, and I called my boss, and he said, no can do, I need you, there's nobody else, and everybody else is out sick, and I got this new contract, and these doors and door jams, I got to get to Lancaster, California. And he wasn't, it seemed like he wasn't very sensitive about my situation, because I asked for time off and an early paycheck, and he didn't want to do it, you know. So I didn't argue. I just felt pretty crummy, but went ahead and honored what he said. So I went and spent the last $20 on a robe for my wife and some shoes, because if she survived this, she was going to need a robe and a pair of chanclas so she could walk around, and just didn't know if she was going to live. But anyway, I came in at 3 in the morning, kissed her goodbye, laid her new robe and shoes there, and I didn't have any gas in my truck, and I drove with what little bit I had, and I literally came to a stop at the shop where the doors where my truck was being loaded, my semi, and I just coasted it in down the street and parked the truck. And after I saw my wife kiss her goodbye, you know, it was the ugliest feeling in the world, because I thought to myself that I wasn't going to see her again. But I needed to, and if she was going to live, we needed this rent, otherwise we were going to be kicked out. We'd lived prior to that 3 years in a pickup truck in the back of a camper shell. And so...
truck?
Huh? No, it was another truck, a Dodge pickup truck. That's another story in itself, but we had just graduated from that to this one-bedroom apartment. And can you imagine taking a sick girl like that, living in a camper shell? So I had very limited choices here. So I pick up my truck, and when I get there, the boss was trying to show that he was sympathetic, and he had another truck that was loaded, and I said, hey, we'll switch this truck. I thought my truck was supposed to be loaded. He said, oh, this is your truck, the guy said. And I said, are you kidding me? I don't know this truck. It was a Freightliner, 1986 Freightliner. And I said, I don't know anything about this truck, you know. And they said, well, they just bought it just for you. And right, okay, you know. So anyway, I yelled at him for loading my truck, because most of the time I would do the loading and tying it down, and didn't really seem very appreciative of them coming in early in the morning to do it for me. I was just looking for a fight. I wanted to relieve some of this tension, and they ignored me, thank God. So I get in my truck, and then my new truck, and I get out of the truck, and I run over to my old truck, and I pull out all my ropes and tie downs, and the night boss says, what are you doing? I said, well, taking my ropes, my straps, and what have you. He says, well, you're going to disable that truck. You can't do that. I said, yes, I can. And so I took off. And I said, nobody drives my truck. This might be a joke. And when I'm gone, I don't want anybody driving my truck. And he said, you can't do that. And I just took off. Get a Humvee. I took off and headed towards Lancaster on the 5 freeway, 22 freeway to the 5 freeway, and no, wait a minute, it was 22 freeway to the 22 to the 405 freeway, heading for the 5 freeway, and then to the Antelope Valley freeway, I-14, take that north to Lancaster. While I was driving at night, my truck, my brand new Freightliner, it's quiet, comfortable. First time I had ever been in it, first time I ever drove it. The lights went out in the dash, my headlights just went totally black. And I was so angry at God, and I was cursing him, actually I was feeling sorry for myself. And I was cursing at him, and I was driving this truck, and all of a sudden, that took my attention away when all my lights in my dash just went black. And my headlights went out. So I was basically driving by the lights and the poles on the 405 freeway, and freaked out, literally, because I couldn't really see where I was going until I would just aim for the next light, and where it was beaming down on the road, and using basically the cars that were driving around to light my way.
Getting surgery at this time.
Yeah, while she was going to have surgery at 7 o'clock in the morning. Okay, and so I, like I said, I cursed God and said, you know, who are you that you if you really do exist, and you're this awesome God of the universe that they say you are, you know, what I heard about in Sunday school, I was an atheist, you know, and I remember this when I was a kid doing it in the Catholic Church. And you're who they say you are. How come you can't get off your chair and come down here and sit with my wife so I can at least go drive? Because we had nobody. We had nobody. We were by ourselves. We had no family. Family was all in Texas. And and the family that was here was pretty busy, and I was pretty prideful. I didn't want to make a big deal about it. I was really hurting inside. At least sit with her. So when I did that, the lights went out. And you think I was smart enough to figure out, hey, you just cursed the God of the universe, you know. You're lucky you didn't send a lightning bolt down. I had no fear of death. I had no fear of anything. Young and dumb, and just didn't know any better. Didn't have a dad teach me fear. And the stepdad that I did have, well, he was something else. That's another story for another time. But anyway, I'm driving in the dead of dark, and I prayed the only prayer I knew, you know, and which was the Our Father. And so then after that, I said, well, hell with you, God, and I stepped on the floor pedal all the way down to the floor, and I said, that's it. I'm out of here, you know. And I was probably doing about 100 miles an hour, I think, because in the dark, the cars that I was passing looked like they were stopped. And when I passed by them, they would just wiggle. I would look back in my rearview mirror and I'd see the headlights go like this, you know. And nobody could call for the cops if there's a crazy guy in a semi-truck with a 45-foot bed hauling down the freeway, because there were no cell phones, you know. And nobody could see smoke signals in the dead of night. So off I went, thinking, you know, I don't care. I'm going to deliver this load. I'm going to hurry up and get back and see my wife, you know, the dead body of my wife. And there's no way to explain what happened next, but I was driving and a beam of light from behind me lit up so bright I thought maybe the cops were behind me. That's what came into my mind. And I looked at my rear view mirrors and I literally couldn't see because the lights were so bright enough that it lit my path, so I wouldn't hit anybody, I guess, or so I could see. But it was the craziest thing, you know. Behind me was east, and if it wasn't a cop, it was the sun. But then I said, no, it can't be the sun, because the sun doesn't rise till about 6. And we were having some of the hottest summers, record-breaking summers. And so I just thought the sun decided to come up a little early or something, and I was the better for it. I didn't look back, and I didn't thank God, and that it could be Him doing it. You can guess whether that really was or not. But as I drove, my path was lit. That's all I could say. There wasn't a whole lot of cars on the freeway, because I was already heading for the Antelope Valley, I-14. And when I got on there, it was daylight now, and I could see. And when I looked back, that light was gone, and I could see at least behind me. So as I started snaking up the I-14, which is the Antelope Highway that gets you to Lancaster through 138, I believe. I'm doing all this by memory. It's been a long time. But back then we didn't have cell phones to tell you how to go. You know, Lila was the secretary. She wrote up a whole page on how to get there to the directions, and I would memorize it and go. And I knew I was on the right road. Didn't question Lila. Never questioned, you know, my memory. And so as I was driving, about 7 o'clock in the morning, I was weaving, because that's the way that highway is. And I looked back at my load. I'm okay. I had a habit of looking at my load, and all of a sudden I looked at my load in one glance, and a whole set of door jambs were shifted that I couldn't see behind me on both sides. and my load was I stuck my head out the window, and my load was sticking out about 6 feet on each side. And I just cursed God, and I cursed those guys for loading my truck, and I cursed myself because I let those idiots load my truck, and I always loaded my own truck and tied my own stuff down. And I was mad. And so I pulled over on a turn that was coming up, and I jackknifed the truck on the gravel and tried to get it. Hey, there's a truck right there, exactly like what I was driving, and it was a Freightliner. Anyway, I jackknifed it, and the load on the left side started to shift, but the load on the right side, couldn't do anything about that, and it just looked like this side needed it more, and I could try to maybe drive like that, but I wouldn't be pulled over. So it didn't quite move the way I wanted to. The truck almost flipped over. I stopped on the side of the road, and I was so mad that I took out my buck knife and I went down the side on the left side, and I cut all the bands and let everything just fall. And it just went wrong. Stupid move. Don't ever do that. But everything fell over, and I started to reload my truck. Reload the load by hand, one piece at a time. These were 400-pound fire doors, and door jambs only weighed about 5 pounds. But the doors were heavy, and some of those fell off too. And as I was there loading it, I started worrying about my wife and worrying about the time and the truck and everything. Just felt like a mountain. Felt like something was chasing me and just making my life miserable. And so I prayed the same prayer, the Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. And after I prayed that prayer, I said, okay, there you go, Creator of the universe, do something. I didn't know how to pray. And after that, this little car, actually I'm waving at all the truck drivers to come over and help me load this truck. Nobody wanted to get out of their cab because it was already too hot. The sun was coming up with like a vengeance, and it was hot. So I was cursing at God and saying this and that, and then I prayed this prayer, and this little car, this little Nissan, we used to call Nissans, a Nissan car pulls up alongside me. I'm going to have to stop here real quick. I'll say something else. This is a little shop that I rent to these guys, and collect rent. I'll be right back. Is that okay?
Yeah.
You can edit this part out?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Or I'll just talk.
Huh?
I'll just talk.
Okay.
Okay, so what's going on here? I mean, aside from George telling a story, which a lot of it I don't really know. I only knew him for about a week in Rockport, and then now I come here and visit him. But I'm gonna swing this out here. This is the setup that we have here. I'm kind of doing this as a filler. We got a camera over there. We got a GoPro right here. That's his GoPro. That's my GoPro. And then obviously this camera right here that I'm rolling on. I don't know how long he'll be, and I'm sorry that you're gonna have to hear me talk. Maybe I will edit this part out. George is one of the wisest guys that I know, and I've only known him for a week, which is pretty crazy. Not a lot of people came up to me while I was volunteering down there in Texas, because I really was the only 20-something-year-old that was there. So when George came up to me, I was a little bit shocked. Not like shocked as in like, oh my gosh, somebody's talking to me, but as in like, what do you got to say? I don't think he said this part, but I'll say it. When I said that I was reading James, he just started saying it by memory. He's memorized first, second, third, fourth, probably the whole first chapter he's got memorized. But he started saying, count it all. He goes, I remember, he goes, count it all joy, my brothers and sisters, for the trials that are beyond, da-da-da-da-da. I don't have it memorized, but he does. And I'm reading out of it, and he's saying it word by word. And that's when I was like, he seems like a friend. Then every day for breakfast, he'd wake up early, 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning, and I'd wake up around that, and I'd go in there. But he would talk about all the things that he's learned in the Bible. And I would just listen, which is very odd for me because usually I'm the one talking and running my mouth, and everybody else just listening. But George was the first person, I think, that I have ever met that talks more than me, but has me listening to him more than anyone else. If that makes sense. Not that I don't listen to people talk, but he'll talk like this for... I remember I screenshotted the last phone call we had, maybe 2.5 hours of conversation. He was probably talking about 2 hours of it. And I was just listening.
Since I leased it out to him. And my other renter, he's not here, but he left the check, so that's good too. Happy about that, because they look slow, but they said it just kind of died down a little bit because of the New Year's.
I don't know if this is... I just trust that I have that right.
Okay. So anyway, where was I?
You unstrapped your
truck,
yeah, and you were putting it back up, and then there was a Nissan that came by.
See that's the DMV there. On a good day,
It looks like it used to be a McDonald's.
yeah, it's been there, the DMV, for a lot of years. People are wrapped around that building, and they stare at this place all the time, and so he doesn't have to advertise. They come across, get their car smogged, go back and have their paperwork done. So it's a really good
location.
Yeah.
Location.
That's why I bought this place, because it kept me very busy. And he was down here over there at that other shop, but his partner was a real something else. And one day he came walking over here and said, "Hey, whenever you want to rent me this place, you know." And I said, "Well," and it's funny because 2 weeks prior to that, I asked God to shut me down because I was a little bit 30-something years doing trainings and engines. I was just tired of it. And he answered my prayer. Crazy, huh? But I tell you, since I don't have a father, I have a father in heaven that's better than any physical father I could ever have. And I don't mean that facetiously, that for you guys who have fathers out there to disrespect and not honor your fathers, man. You have one and they're good to you, you better take care of them and appreciate them, cut their grass, wash their car, and if you owe them money, pay it back. Okay, so that's just all I gotta say about that. Yeah, so anyway,
I do need to pay my debt.
I cut all the straps and everything fell over, and this little car comes over after I prayed. And don't never pray my way, please. I cussed at God, and I'm just telling you how it was. Well, this little car pulls up, and this guy, probably about this tall to my arm. I was already on top of the bed sorting things out, and he says, "Hey, buddy, can you use a hand?" And I looked at this midget of a guy, and I said, "You?" And he says, "Yeah, me." I said, "Well, okay, yeah, sure." And so I looked back up at the sky and I said, "Well, I asked for somebody, but I guess I didn't. I should have said a big somebody. And so this guy starts helping me, and he starts handing me these 400-pound doors. I was the best driver. I was the strongest driver. I mean, you didn't have to tell me. I was the fastest, the best that they had, and I was fast because I was strong, and I could handle these doors, manhandle these doors. You know, with effort, but I could handle them better than most of the guys that had bad backs and what have you. This guy was handing me doors like this, and I was up on the truck, and I would lean on my knees to grab them because I was getting tired. And he was handing me these 400-pound, 200-pound doors like nothing, and throwing these door jams at me. And before you know it, we had this whole bed loaded. I would put the doors in the bottom, and then the door jams in the top, and I'd be about 13 feet up, almost 13 feet, about 12, just under 13 feet, you know. And the whole thing was, and then I'd go, oh, the guy says, you got your tie downs? He says, did you cut those? And I go, yeah, I cut those. He says, oh man, how are you going to tie them down? And I said, oh shoot, I've got my ropes. I got my tie down. So I went in my truck. Nothing happens by coincidence, guys. I did that out of pure anger and stupidity, cutting my straps, and rather than just, you know, unload them. And I was just mad. I was thinking that I'm not, you know, what am I doing all this for? My wife's going to be dead. Why should I even bother to do this? And anyway, that's kind of what happened. But how did I find Jesus? How did he find me? Well, after we loaded the truck, this guy asked me, he says, hey, can I see your bill of lading? And I thought to myself, oh my goodness, this guy's going to hijack my truck. And to see how much I got on the truck, and I just thought that, you know, and I said, well, why do you need to know that? Why do you need to see my bill of lading? He says, oh, I just want to see, you know, who you're taking these to. And I said, well, why would you care? He says, because I'm a contractor myself, and we got a shipment like this coming. Also, you know, and I said, really? And he says, yeah. And I said, what's the name of your company? And I don't remember the name of the company, but it happened to be the company that was on that bill of lading. And so I looked at it, and I said, who did you? He said, so I said, do you have some ID? And he says, no, I got in a hurry to meet whoever was going to drop this stuff off to our place. I said, where's your place? This is in Lancaster. I go, wow, you're saying everything right here. You got no driver's license. And I said, well, okay. And I showed him the bill of lading. He goes, this is my load.
What?
And I said, yeah. And I go, are you serious? And he goes, yeah, I'm serious. It's a heart attack. My father sent me. Get that. Just listen to that. But I just said, my father sent me ahead to take care of business. And I thought to myself, take care of business. Yeah, he's going to do me in and shoot me in the desert and steal my load. And I said, oh, what the heck? You know, I got nothing to live for anyway. My wife's going to be dead. At least I get to see her. So I said to the guy, okay, so what's up from here? He says, well, first of all, that's our load. And he says, trust me. And he says, I just helped you, so believe me. I said, okay, what's the second proof? He says, the map's wrong. I said, listen, Lila has never made a mistake on the map. Never. I've been in the tightest places in Los Angeles, San Fernando Valley, and some of the wickedest streets you can imagine with a truck like this, and she has never, ever got it wrong. So this can't be right. He says, no, trust me. We were on the other side of Lancaster. That's where that map is. We're on this side. There is no map. He says, you'll have to trust me. This is the way. Remember that part. This is the way. My father sent me, and this is the way.
And Jesus and Paul in those moments.
Yeah, so then, I didn't hear any of that. My ears didn't hear this is the way, or this, my father sent me. But I just took a chance on faith that he was telling the truth, so I followed him. And my radio wasn't working because my power was down.
Yeah. And
there were no such thing as cell phones back then. There were, but it was a big old monster military brick, you know, cost you a fortune, and plus the bill. If the phone didn't kill you picking it up, you know, the bill would. And so anyway, I followed this guy way into the desert, you know, where they're building new houses.
Mm-hmm.
And from a distance, I could see the job site where the skeleton of 2x4s were up, and they were literally building a neighborhood. So I get there, and these guys out of nowhere came and just unloaded the truck by hand. And I was there too, and they just came out, and boom, it was done in no time. And he signs the bill of lading. I give him his copy. I jump back in the truck, and the interior is all black. Beautiful Freightliner. And when I sat in it, when I was broke down, I didn't shut it off because I was afraid that the battery, I couldn't start up again.
Yeah.
And this time, though, I got so confident that I shut the engine off, and here I sat back in the truck that was 220 degrees inside that cab. And because we were in the desert, and the sun was on that yellow truck outside, but black interior, and I'm sitting here like this, and I'm sweating like crazy, and it's in my eyes, and I'm cursing God, because it wouldn't start, nothing, click. And I come out of that truck, man, like a lion, mad. This just can't be happening. And so I tell the guy, I said, listen, and I thought he was standing next to me. I need a jump start. And I could have swore there was someone standing there next to me. I looked again, there was nobody. And I looked again, there was nobody. Everybody that came to help were gone. It was like a ghost town, and the wind blowing, and curling in the wind, the dust. What is going on here? And did I knock out or something? Where are these guys? And I guess it was lunchtime, so I figured, and they took off. So I'm walking around, nothing. Then I see this Pettibone coming down the road, dirt road. A Pettibone is this huge, humongous forklift that can extend up 2 stories to give you the stuff so you can do your roof or whatever, when you're building something. So it's a giant forklift is what it is. And there's this kid sitting in it, driving it, and he's got a set of headphones on it because this thing is so loud as he's driving it, and the forks are banging as it's driving down this road, and he's got a set of headphones on, but they're like music headphones or something. And the forks are up high, and I was waving at this guy, and I thought to myself in my low-life mind, I'm going to knock this guy out with my good right, and I'm going to steal his batteries and put them on my truck, and I'm going to go see my wife. I don't care about Walter's, truck here or anything. That was my boss. I'm going to do it my way, and I'm not going to wait for him. And all these crazy thoughts went in my head. Well, as soon as it was time to, I'm sorry, I'm thinking 2 things at one time. Well, edit that part out. The guy shows up with his Pettibone, and I'm waving at him, but before he shows up, I decide that I am going to just forget it. Everything's not going my way. And so I stand out there in the middle of the road, and I know it had to be the devil because he basically wanted me to kill myself. So I stuck my arms out in my window like this, and I threw my head back, and I looked back one more time to see the fork. One of the forks of that Pettibone was aiming for me, so I threw my head back like this, and I kept checking, make sure that fork was going to run me through, it was going to scare me. I was very serious. My wife was going to be dead. Nothing ever I did would turn into gold. It was just a living nightmare, living my life, and I just thought this is the best way out, and anyway, I have my head thrown back, sweat's burning in my eyes. I got my arm out like that, like a cross. And I guess it's like Jesus saying, I already did that. You don't have to do that. All of a sudden, the brakes and that the guy flips the micro brake. There's a micro switch on it. I know that's what he did because it just, I've worked on that equipment. And you could hear him sliding to come to a stop. He had seen me, and I hear this screaming and yelling at me to get out of the way, and I just stayed there. And I could hear this thing screaming like it's not gonna stop. Excuse me 1 second. Right. My wife usually does this.
For those of you listening on the podcast, George is currently cashing some checks. We will be back after a short intermission.
Yes.
For those who are here on YouTube watching on the video format, you get to see my pretty face in this Wonder Bible. This is brought to you by Wonder Bible. I've seen these on the infomercials. I've never actually seen them in person. It doesn't have the whole Bible.
Trying to remember my code here. Can't remember it. I'll call my wife in a minute. Okay, let's try this. That's it. I'm gonna call him. Let me get out of the line so let this guy get in.
You know, if you got the app, you can take a picture of them.
I don't have it. It's okay. Stopped in the middle of the street here. Yeah, you live with me, you live on the edge, man. You live with me, you live on the edge. Well, of course, my life has always been that way. Tow truck driver, and you got to do actually recovery specialists. Do some dumb things like go over a cliff to get a car and make sure your truck doesn't come over the process. And you never know who you're going to meet in the middle of the night when you go tow a car sometimes. You get some really desperate people, man, hold guns on you. Insist you ought to release your car or they're going to shoot you. Or you go pick up a car that's illegally parked and they come out with a baseball bat. Not the job you want your kids to do when they grow up. But, you know, somebody's got to do it. You can edit that out too, right?
Yeah.
One time she texted me the thing, and but that was like 82 million texts ago. I'm gonna call her right now. Just yeah, I can let her do it later. I don't have to do this. I can let her do it. In fact, we're gonna let her do it. How's that?
Sounds good.
So this is one stop. Go to another stop.
We'll pick back up. Driving by these police officers.
Can't be anything serious. They're smiling.
Right.
So anyway, my truck is dead. I'm contemplating knocking this poor guy out who's doing his job just for my selfish reasons of starting up my truck. And rather, you know, and I thought, well, if he has a pair of jumper cables, I said, nah, it takes too long. I'll just knock him out, steal his batteries.
Duh. Why not?
You know, and the guy comes out of the, you know, well, actually, I was trying to skewer myself with the forks, but he did come to a stop. And when he came to a stop, the forks, when it finally stopped, it rocked backwards and then it went forward. I mean, I felt a little touch, like someone going like that, but you know, just, and then it came back and it pushed me.
You standing in the middle of the street?
Huh?
Are you standing in the middle of the street?
Yeah, standing in the middle of the street of a dirt road, and I was flagging him to stop so I could get him to get out of his truck, out of that forklift, so I could give him some forklift right there. I got a little petty bone right there. What's that?
So the options were, you know, like, let's just kill myself, or we can steal this poor guy's truck, or, you know, you weren't really thinking, were you?
Well, I was young.
How old were you? 20?
I was dumb. I was like, by this time I was 25.
Yeah.
25 years old. I think because I was 26 when George was born. And we were married about 4 years before we decided to have a kid. Because we were living like very, very impoverished people. So then, anyway, the forklift pushes me back. The guy gets off the forklift, starts screaming, rah, 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 cussing me out and everything to it. And then I just looked at him, and he saw a ghost and just took off running down the road. And all I saw were the dust of his feet kicking up the dust. And crazy, huh? And so the engine is idling. He parked the vehicle, and yeah, like I knew he did, he flipped the micro switch. So what that does is locks the vehicle down. You're not going to move it, and it locks your brakes. So that, you know, if you're loading or unloading, it's just frozen right there. And I opened up the engine compartment. The batteries were too small, so I closed them and left it running there in the middle of that dirt road. So I went back to my truck and looked at my truck. I said, the hell with it. So I turned around, and out in the field was just nothing but desert. Miles and miles and miles. And one hill after another. So I just started walking. There was no water to drink. I was thirsty. I hadn't had a drop of water, and it's already after noon. So I just started walking in the desert and cursing at God. No longer praying, just cursing God, because I wasn't going to see my wife. I knew she was going to die. I knew that everything, you know, the devil was walking with me too and telling me all this stuff, you know, that this is going to be like this. And so I went over several hills. I don't really know how many. I kind of just, with being delirious, dehydrated, almost passing out, I come up over one more hill, and I said, that's it. I'm just going to sit down on this hill when I get up there, and I'm just going to die. It's too hot to walk anymore. So I got up to the very top of the hill, and I looked out over this beautiful valley of desert, cactuses, Joshua trees, and boulders, and I felt like someone sat down next to me. And started to talk to me and telling me that it's going to be okay. Your wife's going to be okay. You're going to be okay. Everything's going to be okay. Just trust me. And I thought I was talking to myself or something, or maybe I had too much sun and I needed something to drink. But then I looked over my left to see who was talking to me, and there was nobody there. It was just twisty wind and dust. And I looked down from where I was sitting, and at the very bottom was this trailer that was parked down there, and it was a like a construction trailer, construction administration trailer. So I didn't look. I mean, I thought I looked down there before. I didn't see it, but now it was down there. So I made my way down there. And as I got down there, you know, there was 3 or 4 pickup trucks that were parked around it, and they were newer trucks, and I could hear yelling and screaming coming from inside as I got closer to that trailer, and people were fighting inside there. Men were. And I thought to myself, well, all I need to do is just either steal a truck, beat somebody up, use the phone. Something's going to happen. I'm going to do something. But I'm going to get back home. And you know, I'm at a point where you just didn't want to come across me and get in a fight with me. it just was one of those things because I was on kill mode or be killed.
No laws.
Yes, the guy on the
Back.
freeway that is just going like O.J. Simpson. And
By the way, this overheated.
okay.
It's okay. I mean, I think we got yours. It's still rolling.
Well, so anyway, I'm at the point of no return, and so I thought to myself, but I'm always, I used to get in fights when I was younger and dumber, and I always came out ahead because of, I'd always think through it, what I'm going to do rather than just get into it, and what the outcome was. I was like an animal. You always look for an escape. You always got to know you're escaping. So I had a plan. Well, if I didn't survive this, but I was going to survive. Either I was going to die here, or I was going to go back, see my wife, and die on the road, whatever. I didn't know which way it was going to go. My life was so. And this voice that said, "You're going to be okay. Everything's going to go right," that dissipated. And I said, okay, I'm going to open up the store. I'm going to go in there. I'm going to beat the living daylights out of these guys, and I'm going to steal their keys and take off, or make a phone call. So when I get in there, actually I didn't get in there. I opened up the door, and 12 guys come running out of that trailer, and I know there were 12 because I counted them. When they came out, they all got into these trucks, and it surprised me that the door opened like that, and it kind of just froze me, and I stood back and I watched these guys come out. 12 guys, huh? 12 apostles, I don't know. They all came out, went into their trucks, and then before I could even say, "Hey buddy, can I use the phone and have some water, or can somebody help me? Got a pair of jumper cables?" None of that came out of me. So I went inside. Maybe their secretary here will lend me a phone or something. No secretary. You know, these guys didn't care. I was standing there. I don't even know that they saw me. So I went inside, and then all of a sudden, the door slammed from behind me. Wham. Okay. Air conditioning was going. Wow. There was a phone right there on the wall, and so it was a pay phone. You know, the other phones you had to dial 9 or something to get out. Well, I just grabbed the phone, and stupid me, I looked inside, you know, where the coins usually fall. Yeah. And there was quarters in there, so. You know, I say stupid me because when I was a kid, I used to always look in there, and sometimes you get lucky and find a nickel or a quarter. And so the Lord paid for my phone call, so I stuck him in there, called Walter. "Hey, Walter, I'm broke down over here. Can you send somebody to pick me up?" And he goes, "Where the hell are you? We don't even know where you're at. You haven't called in." Da, 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 da. I said, "What's the deal? What's going on? The load's done." You know, he said, "Where did you drop it off?" You know, I said, "Where I was supposed to drop it off. Lila gave you the wrong map." And just going on and on and on. I said, "Walter, listen, I already dropped it off with the right people, and I'm making good time." I said, "But my truck is down, and I need you to send somebody out here with batteries or something to help me jumpstart the truck." "Yeah, you know, and there was no talking to this guy. He was just yelling at me. "I'm going to kick your butt when you get back." And you know, "Walter, did you hear me? Who did you drop it off with? Did you get his driver's license and all that?" And I said, "Listen." He wouldn't listen, so then I just hung up on him. And I go, "Oh man, is it too much? If you're a God that sees, to have a glass of water," I could barely talk. And I'm like this, and then I look like that, and there's a big old bottle of sparkling water. Nice and cool. So I grab the cups, and I'm just drinking like a fool, not even thanking the God who put me in air conditioning and put water there so I could drink as much as I could. And then I sat on the floor. I was drinking so much that water was spilling all over the place, and it was more than I could handle. But I sat on that wet floor, and I just sat up against the counter like that, and air conditioning was blowing on me. Wow, what a feeling. And then all of a sudden I hear this truck pull up, and then the brakes, the guy puts on his micro brake, puts air brakes. And semi, and I stick my head up, look out the window, and there's this Freightliner identical to my truck. The front of the cab, you know, it's got a sleeper. I mean, it's my truck. I mean, yellow and Freightliner in the same year. I go, man, this is a great God, you know. He even brought my truck over here. And I looked up, and there was somebody in there, and then I looked at the back of his load. He had this huge water tanker in the back. Water? I wanted water.
Yeah.
And he sends me a semi with a whole tanker, you know, so it wasn't just that. I prayed for water, and look at that. A big old tanker with water in it. And so, did I think of those things? No, I just cursed God in a crazy way, and I didn't even thank him. You know, when you say blank damn, I did something like that. And I said, then the devil came in me and he said, okay, knock this guy out, steal his truck, take the batteries and steal the truck, unload the load and just go. All right, yeah, sure, okay, let's do this. So I went out the door, and again thinking to knock this guy out and steal his truck, rather than, because I knew he was going to have a pair of jumper cables. I knew he still couldn't do anything for me. It was a dead-end road. So I opened the door, walked outside. All of a sudden, you know, I turn around and I look at this guy face to face. And he wasn't that he was a midget or he was my size. He was standing down at the very bottom of the floor, and he was just this giant of a person, from a midget to a giant. And then all of a sudden, my jaw just dropped. I mean, his face was way bigger than my hands, and there was no way my fist would have just been a little hand in his face, you know. But I was still thinking of hitting this guy, dumb as I was. But all of a sudden, the back of the door from behind me slammed shut, and instinctively I turned around and grabbed the door, either to run from this guy or check to see if the door was going to open or what. And it was locked. Couldn't go in. And I turned around, and this guy, this giant of a man, says, "Hey, buddy, I'm lost. Can you give me a hand?" I said, "Where have I heard that before?" I said, "What do you got there, sir?" And he says, "Well, I got this map, but I'm all over the place, man." And I looked at the map, and he said, "Well, I know where you're at." And I said, "Yeah, I know about this map. I had the same map." And some guy, 1/4 your size, helped me find my way. And he says, "Well, I sure would appreciate it if you could help me find my way." I said, "Hey, listen, got a question for you." And he says, "Well, what is it?" I said, "You wouldn't have," and as I'm walking down the stairs, and this guy just getting taller, "You wouldn't happen to have a set of jumper cables for this truck, do you?" He goes, "Well, I certainly do." And my jaw just dropped. I said, "Are you serious? 48 volt you got in this truck, right?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "You got cables for that truck?" He goes, "Yep." I said, "Well, I could sure use them, because I have a truck identical to yours." And he says, "Not a problem." He says, I know the fix." And I said, "Well, what is it?" He says, "Well, these trucks came out defective with their alternators. If you have this truck, there's a recall on the alternator." I go, "Really?" And he goes, "Yes, really." And so as we're walking around the truck, he opens up the panels, and there's these humongous cables in it with some really thick cables. And I said, wow, this is too amazing to be true. And he says, "Get in the truck and show me where your truck's at. We'll fire you up and get you going." And I said, "Really?" He goes, "Yeah, just show me where I got to go." So, and as we're driving in this truck, he's telling me the story of how he broke down at the other job site, and that the same company had hired him, not that job site, but another job site in the desert, and he had just bought this truck, cost him $250,000, an ungodly amount, you know, with this tanker. And he went to water that truck, but his batteries went out, and he had to sleep with his truck because there were a bunch of misfits running around stealing batteries and vandalizing all the equipment. So he slept with his truck, and he fought these guys off all night long. And I found it kind of hard to believe a guy this big, they weren't afraid of him. But so anyway, he says that that was never going to happen to me again. I don't care that they recall it and they fix it, blah blah blah. I had me a set of jumper cables made, because there were so many trucks that came by that could have helped me, but I had no jumper cables. So anyway, we're driving through the desert looking for the job site, and I don't really know where I'm at, because I've been walking for so long, and I just pretend to, because I didn't want to be stuck out there in the desert, and this guy was going to help me. He was very friendly, and I really wanted to help him too. So we're going over one hill, another hill, and finally, in the distance, we can see the structure of a city being built. A neighborhood. And I'll try to drive easier. The guy, he says before I said it, oh, there it is, and I said, yeah, there it is, and so we get there. We're driving like through a maze where all these buildings are being built, these houses, and then I couldn't find my truck. I said, man, is this the job site? Oh man! And then he says, oh, there's a truck right there, and sure enough, it was my truck, big yellow Freightliner. And so we get to the truck, and jump starts it, fired up and good to go, and let's go. I get on the truck and just take off, and I'm going home. And by this time it's like around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the devil jumps in with me, and he says, all right, we're going to do this right, aren't we? We're going to just get on the 5 free. After the 14, we're going to jump on the 118 or the 5 free, whatever you want. We're just going to plow everybody down, because it's the rush hour in LA. Hello. LA, you don't rush through traffic at 2 o'clock
Never been to
in the
LA.
afternoon. Oh my gosh. LA is terrible.
I'll be there too.
It took me till 3 o'clock to get there from where I was at. And a maze of cars, of course, always, but for some reason, I had an open road all the way to the 405, to the 22, the Garden Grove Freeway. I got off on Garden Grove Boulevard and ended up in front of the hospital where my wife was in record time. Never happened like this before. Never. At that time, I'd be stuck in traffic till about 7, 8 o'clock at night sometimes, bumper to bumper.